Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
We're rolling. I'm trying out a new position here. Got the feet up on the couch, up on the chair.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get as cozy and comfortable as possible because I really want to
Let's get cozy.
Get cozy and get really intimate into this conversation.
Oh, yes.
And so to start that off, please tell us about how you made mac and cheese for your kids last night.
Okay, this was my mom's magic recipe. You take half a stick of butter and you melt the butter. And then you put a quarter cup of flour and you make a roux with that. Put 2 cups of milk in, get it all creamy, and then it creamifies. And then you melt the cheese, and then you're boiling the pasta, and then you put it all together and you bake it, and it's so good.
What kind of cheese did you use?
I use some medium grated cheddar.
And then what kind of pasta did you use?
Elbow macaroni.
And
But you could use shells. You could use whatever you like.
All right, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then bake for how long?
Bake for like half an hour, and I like to sprinkle a little extra cheese on top because then it gets kind of like golden and a little bit crispy on the top there.
Yeah.
I don't do any breading on the top, but the cheese really, it's like the texture of the crunchy cheese and the soft pasta underneath. Now,
not to be a buzzkill here, but you ever calculate the macros on something like that for
intentionally? No, sir.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Some things need not be known.
That is that one might be that one you just keep in the vault. It just doesn't come out.
Just lock it away.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let us then take that. I hope you all got a little nugget out of that. Maybe your mouth is watering, and we're going to transition into our topic of the day, which is talking about failure.
Oh, yeah.
Introduce us to what we're going to get into, Satya.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about the psychological aspect of training, and simultaneous to that, we have been doing a lot of formats in Persist, specifically the pump lift track of our online training program, where you intentionally go to failure. Mm-hmm. And I see you doing it in the gym. I see Megs and Shauna who are training pump lift with you. And it's tough, man. Like, you are going to the point of screaming and making all sorts of interesting noises. And I just thought this is kind of a unique concept because when you're training in gyms, and we've talked about our experiences training in gyms over the summer, you don't see a lot of people going to failure in the good way or maybe even at all. And there's kind of a nuanced aspect of intentionally going to failure in training where you're not literally failing to get the rep back up, but you are achieving form failure, which is the point where you have thoroughly exhausted your muscles in an intentional way. So I was curious about 2 aspects of that. One, what actually does that mean, to break down for people who are not familiar with what it feels like to go to form failure without actually literally failing a rep or sometimes failing a rep. Let's get into the nitty gritty of that in training. And then second, I think that there's a layer of how do you approach the mental aspect of training when you are going to make it so hard that you are kind of going to fail on purpose. That's kind of a mind flip from this, belief of like training is always like positive and building up and yeah.
Well, I'm going to start with a very, very simple analogy that is going to illustrate how failure can either be incredibly safe or incredibly dangerous, okay? And we're going to compare 2 exercises, the squat and the deadlift, all right? So as an exercise, this is what I want you to imagine. The first part of it you could do. The second part, I highly discourage you from trying. Go out into your garage and go to the back bumper of your vehicle, okay? And get yourself hands down underneath that bumper, dig your feet in, try and pick up your car. Go for it. What happens? It might lift a little bit depending on how strong you are. Like, you might get some weight to come up, but the tires ain't coming off the ground unless you have like a little Fiat and you're like a world's strongest man, okay? And you will almost certainly have your spine intact and the rest of your body fine. Just nothing will happen. You just won't budge it. It's like, go lift the thing. Nothing happened. Go open the really tight jar. Nothing happened. Failure, safe. The other situation, imagine that you're standing there, you're at the bottom of your squat, and somebody drops a car on you. And you say, stand up with the car on your back. That is a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
The weight of itself in the position that you're in with how your body, the constitution of your body, like you do not want to fail with something grossly over your capacity in a position like a squat, a compromised position. So essentially what I'm trying to illustrate with this is failure in and of itself is not problematic in physical endeavors. Because a lot of people say, hey, don't go to failure, you hurt yourself. Like I'm going to stay away from failure because there's an increased risk of injury.
Right.
That is the principal drawback. The second reason people don't go to failure is because it's fucking hard. Like, to do a all-out 60-second sprint on a bike is extremely painful. To go 80% on a bike for 60 seconds is significantly less painful, right? To like push your threshold, your failure limit, your physical capacity can be uncomfortable. But I think before discomfort comes the fear. Once people get past the fear, then the discomfort's really bad. And then if you can get past the discomfort, then, there's a lot on the other side of failure and pushing to failure in safe environments.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit about what's on the other side, because that sounds really hard. Like, why would anyone want to do that?
I mean, it's pretty much as simple as you work hard, you get results. You work less hard, you get less results. You don't work hard, you get probably no results. If you don't work at all, you regress, right? So it's kind of a linear relationship.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the fitness industry that want to like argue around the nuances of like, well, is pushing to failure or 1 rep shy of failure or 2 reps shy of failure? Like, is there really that much of a difference? They like have these studies where they have these very controlled, weight training protocols with like moderate to advanced lifters, even some beginners that are under the watchful eye of a physical therapist or an exercise scientist who's like counting every rep and telling him when to stop. And, in those studies where it's like, is going to failure the right one, or is going to 1 rep from failure the right one, or is going to 2 reps before failure the right one? Like, I would just encourage this audience to say all of those people, whether it's 1 rep shy, 2 reps shy, or no rep shy, they're all going to failure. They're all so close to their physical potential on exercise that they're getting kind of the max benefit. There's not a lot of difference in that zone. I think there's a huge group of people that never even touch that zone. And I'm not picking on Megan, my wife, but there was an instance the other day where we were training and she was, she knows the goal of the weight training sets, yet she was maybe a little distracted, or she was trying to lift with a partner and wasn't sure how to load her own bar. And there was her final set, like she had done 2 sets of 10 and the third one was supposed to be a tough set of 10. And really all of them were supposed to be kind of within that margin of failure. And on her last set of 10, I just was like not convinced that she was getting the stimulus. And I was like, keep going, keep going, keep going. She ended up doing 20 reps with her final weight before I was like, that's good, stop. Like it's now you're starting to reach that form failure point. And so here's somebody who's been lifting for a long time, knows the drill, knows the message. Like she was not in like even the ballpark of where she needed to be for that particular weight. And it was just a good reminder, a good wake up call. And I even we chatted about it. I was like, hey, I think, take more responsibility in these moments to just really hone in on we got to find that zone of effort to achieve what you want in here, which is maximal efficiency results for the time that you're putting in.
I think it can be so hard to figure that out. And I'm wondering if you have some specific pointers about how do you know when you are close to failure? Because at a certain point, if I'm squatting, I don't know, 145, like it feels hard. 155 also feels hard. 165 also feels hard. Like there's not that much like difference in those. And so how do you mentally, what are some mental cues or some physical cues or like some ways that you know, or is it just because of experience and because you've logged your weights and you can kind of benchmark from that?
I think there's a few pieces to that, because you're right. Like it will start to feel hard way before you're hitting the zone of intensity that really will achieve progressive overload and progress and growth. I can say that because I feel it frequently when I'm in the gym. Like I'm doing my building sets on my back squats and I'm like, ooh, that was kind of hard. But I'm like, and I know because I did this in the last 3 weeks, like I've got another 50 pounds to jump up, you know? Warm up and building sets don't always feel good.
That's right.
They actually rarely ever do.
Yeah,
and your first working set usually feels like garbage.
Yes.
And your second working set feels better.
Yes.
And then your third and fourth are like, whoa, I'm back to like the hurt locker. Yeah, that's kind of a typical build for a lot of people. So you can't just rely fully on feelings. Feelings and data don't necessarily equate. But before you can even get there, you have to break through that fear barrier. Because if you're in an exercise where you have fear and you don't trust your mechanics, then I would actually argue that it's not worth pushing to intensity on that.
Yeah.
And that you should just sort of say, like, this is not an exercise today. Like, one, is it worth doing this exercise at all? Right? Like, if you can't push to intensity and closer to failure to get that threshold of like, then what's the point of doing it? And I'm not saying there's no point. There are points, but you have to ask the question. You're like, hey, I'm doing a good morning today. And man, I just don't feel like I can push this, to like I'm supposed to do 6 heavy reps in the good morning. Like, that doesn't feel safe, or I'm not confident to push that. So, okay, well, is there another hinging exercise that you could do where for 6 reps you feel good and you can, push yourself? Like, okay, maybe you should switch to that. Alternatively, you could say, well, what could I change about this good morning that makes me feel more confident to go to that fatigue point where I'm starting to break form? Well, for me personally, doing sets of 15 in the good morning get me there. Mm-hmm. I can load up with much less weight. I can really focus on slow tempos. I can slow things way down and increase my rep ranges. And then guess what? Like 85-pound good morning is suddenly making my hamstrings and my glutes scream. And I don't feel like I'm going to like have a catastrophic failure with an 85-pound bar on my back. Yet I'm getting the benefit of stimulus to my hamstrings and my glutes because I changed the rep range. I slowed it down. So that's how you can take an exercise rather than just being like, I'm going to swap this out for something I feel more confident. It's like take the exercise that the way it's written, you don't feel confident to go push it, but you can manipulate the sets and the reps and the tempos to make you feel confident to push it. And then the third option is you say, today, I'm not doing this exercise for intensity. I'm doing this exercise to build my confidence, to build my motor control, to get more exposure, to do, like basically get in some reps so that in the future I can get some payoff from it.
Yeah.
That's what snatching and clean and jerk should have been like in the CrossFit days for everybody.
Yeah. Nobody
should have been doing CrossFit classes in their first 6 months going intensely into snatch and clean and jerk. They should have all just been like, is the juice worth the squeeze on this exercise to dedicate a year to just learning it? Mm-hmm. And then every day you're in the gym, it's just lightweight, drilling, building motor control, doing the Bergener warm up, doing the thing. And then cool, we spent 15 minutes on that. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
I think you've heard my argument on this, which is that for Gen Pop, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze there. If you're not like coming in and being like, I want to be an Olympic lifter, then why spend 15 of your 60 precious minutes that you have in the gym to try and do skill development on something that may pay off down the road for you to lift intensely, when you could spend those 15 minutes doing, a superset of like heavy goblet squats and split squats and just get a massive leg pump and build a ton of leg strength. And you know what I mean? So, anyway, so that was 3 ways to approach an exercise that you're not feeling confident to get over the fear barrier.
Yeah.
1, switch the exercise. Hey, you don't feel good back squatting? Go to leg press. You feel good here? Hell yeah, I feel secure. This thing is just stable and safe and I can really crank. 2, okay, you don't feel good doing a set of 5 in the back squat heavy to get that stimulus close to failure. How about a set of 15 where you slow the tempo down? That's what I did today. Like I was doing sets of 8 to 10 with a very slow eccentric, a pause in the bottom, an upright torso on my back squat, and my quads were reaching form failure. My movement was like I couldn't, but it wasn't 300 pounds, it was 200 pounds, and it got the job done for me, and I felt much safer. So I manipulated the reps and the tempo. And then the third is, okay, today you're supposed to do back squats, and you're like, okay, cool. Like I want to learn back squats, and people who are starting out in training, they should want to learn back squats. And so it's like, okay, well, let's just make this more of a building a foundation of the movement so that in 2 months or 3 months, when I've gotten more reps under my belt, I can start to really push intensity.
Yeah. I'll throw in another one, which is, this isn't always an option, but for some things you can adjust your setup. Like if I have spotter arms on a heavy back squat day, I am that much more comfortable to push hard.
Hell yeah. That is something that actually was in my brain to mention, and I'm glad you brought it back up, because there are a lot of ways to basically manipulate your setup in the gym for exercises to make them not just safer, like build confidence. So safety spotter arms, if you're not familiar with these things, if you ever have squatted in a power rack or you've seen a power rack, you're in a squat rack, and then these little like beams that are along your side, and they can support a lot of weight. And ideally, you put them about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch below where the bottom of your squat is. So you can squat all the way down, and should you get stuck and not be able to lift it up, you literally just kind of collapse down to the floor. The bar rests on the spotter arms, and you're safe. I love that. I always set them up when I go for heavy sets of squats because I don't want to trust a spotter behind me to try and lift me up. I just want to be able to bail and know that I'm going to be safe. And that allows me to take a risk. You stand up with that 4th rep and you're like, whoa, that was hard. I don't want to fail. I'm going to put it back rather than try for that 5th where you could maybe squeak out that intensity point that we were looking for. Hey, with the safety spotter arms there, I like it. Now this doesn't have to be just like a catch you if you fail type of situation. I see people with, for example, with dips. These dip bars that we have at our gym, they're adjustable on the rack. And it's like when I do my dips, I take extra care to put the dip bar at a height that I know I can get a full range of motion at the bottom of my dip without having to like wiggle or maneuver my body and change my body position. I can stay vertical. I don't have to like bend my legs and arch my back to like make sure that my knees don't touch the ground, or that the weight that's hanging from my body, because I'm doing a weighted dip, I don't want that to touch the ground. So get everything into the right setup. Then if the dip bars are that high, I would have to jump considerably from the ground to get there. So I bring a bench over, and I put that bench right in the spot where I literally can put my arms on the dip bar straight locked out. I can take like a baby step off the bench, almost like I'm stepping off of a ledge. And I'm right in a solid position without the weight swinging or doing anything to start my dips. That saves energy, keeps the weight from swinging, gets me into a good starting position, and allows me to have more energy and effort to bring safely to that exercise. It's kind of similar to somebody who like takes a heavy bar out of the squat rack and then walks like 10 steps backwards
Right.
with the bar on their back to try and like, get away because they don't want to be close to the squat rack. Those 10 steps are 10 steps for a lot of things to kind of get tired, fatigued, and for you to basically take away from the squat. That's why like when power lifters go for world records and they train heavy squats, they use something called a monolift, which you basically is you take the bar out of the squat rack. You never move your feet. You stand up, the squat rack moves out of the way for you, and then you squat straight down. So there's no steps, there's no added extra movement.
Yeah.
Anyhow, great point about setup, changing the setup.
Yeah. Well, what have you learned over time psychologically about going to failure in training?
Well, I've learned, I mean, I learned, I don't want to say incorrectly, but my time in CrossFit, I think, left this impression in me, which was, man, failure's pretty gnarly. Like, it might not be worth it if you're in it for the long haul, if you're in it for longevity, or if you're in it to like, live to see another day. It's okay for like super athletes, but it's not good for everyday folks. And the reason the reason for that, to sort of continue the discussion that we just had, but really talk about that specific environment, was when you go to failure in an exercise or a movement, and you're just doing a singular task, then you're able to control a lot more variables, and you're able to sort of tune in with yourself, and you have like you can have a more heightened awareness of like what your body's doing and where things might go well or not go well. In a circumstance where you like, let's say we'll go back to the heavy back squat example, you're fully rested, you're focused, this is the only thing that's happening, there aren't distractions, you don't have, like, that's a good environment to go for the really hard back squat. A less optimal environment would be like sprint on the treadmill for, a minute, and then go do the back squat, and then run back to the treadmill, and then run back to the back squat, and do that until you are completely exhausted. That just raises a lot of, it introduces some risk that when you're pushing to that absolute limit of your capacity, at some point in time will probably, for most people, result in something less than optimal happening, an injury or some tweak or something like that. So that was sort of like the value of learning how to push intensely from CrossFit was super powerful for a lot of people. It was like, whoa, I learned what it feels like to really work hard. Like, it made people work exceptionally hard. I'm not talking about in a singular exercise, just globally, like, whoa, this is how people get after it. And it was a proud moment for a lot of people. Like, I'm a badass. Like, did you see what I just did in there? Like, you walk out and you're like, and that is super, super powerful. And then it's in some, over time, you do it enough, something eventually bad happens. Hopefully it's not catastrophic. It's like a minor tweak. And then you learn from that and you recalibrate how much effort you're going to give to certain exercises. But at least you had that experience of like, dude, I know how to work hard. I feel strong. I feel powerful. I feel confident. I'm a badass kind of thing. And then I think what I kind of evolved again is like, how do I take that level of effort and apply it to situations that are a bit more, we'll call them controlled. I would call like, that was more of like chaotic.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, what about a controlled environment? What about like do 5 back squats, or I don't know, better example is like do 10 hard back squats and then go get on the rowing machine and row for, 500 meters pretty hard, and then take a 3-minute rest, and then do that again, and then do that again. Okay, that's a little bit more control because there's these rest intervals. Like, I'm not going from the rowing machine into the heavy squat, like, Yeah, it's not the perfect scenario to like focus on one thing at a time, but we learned that concurrent training methods and bringing multiple disciplines together has a tremendous added value and is a super fun and engaging way for people to train. So, okay, I can bring that effort of failure into these new controlled environments. And that made me really psychologically feel, oh my gosh, like I don't need to dial back. I just needed to control the variables of my training so that I could push really hard and not put myself in this potential hole of either injury risk or complete burnout or just overexhaustion.
Yeah.
And then the final psychological like place I've arrived is sort of a message that I have in coaching now, which is in a mission for how we approach training and functional bodybuilding, is that our goal as coaches or as in the fitness industry should be to arm our clients with the capacities necessary to be able to give full physical effort in any, in whatever they want to do in life and feel safe doing it.
Yeah.
So that like that is that you're, when you give a full effort physically, like you really push yourself, there's tremendous psychological, emotional, physical, spiritual growth that can happen.
Yeah.
And if we can mitigate as much of the risk that would go into something like that and make people feel confident and safe to do it more frequently, whether it's in the gym in like a contrived exercise environment, like, an FBB workout, or if it's out up on the mountain and they're like, I want to get up to the mountain top as fast as I can. And they're like huffing and puffing and going for it. Like, and they feel like they can really drop the hammer on their hike, like I want people to be in a position to do that rather than living in a state of fear. If I push myself, I'm going to hurt myself, or like literally just not wanting to feel that discomfort because it's been so long that they haven't touched it that they're like, oh, that just seems scary to go there.
Yeah.
But if we dose it enough in these training sessions, and if we teach them how to do things in a way that they know, like, okay, yeah, I'm in a safe zone, then it becomes almost like this thing that you're drawn to do from time to time. I saw you training today, and you were going at it, like you were really, and it was, it was a proud moment. Not that I am responsible for it, but just proud of you. It's like you were going to failure in a skill that is not something that you've had for a long time.
Yeah.
You were doing handstand push-ups to failure, strict handstand push-ups to failure with aerobic fatigue from a ski erg, which that combination, it took time to develop. You had to put in the reps. You were patient, and, several years of you just doing handstand holds and negatives and the whole thing, so that one day you can now take a very high skill, potentially risky exercise, push to failure, feel confident, and get a tremendous, stimulus and feeling out of it. It's a really cool arc that you've gone through. And I don't know, it just came to mind thinking about this topic right now.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Aww.
Hell yeah. Satya was doing so. Yeah, there was a lot going on.
I was
there.
making a lot of noises.
But like not everybody's patient enough to put in the time to get to that place, and not everybody needs to.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs to be doing strict handstand push-ups, but
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about it too because not so much on that piece today, but there have been a lot of things in training that have taught me things about failure. And I'm a real nervous Nelly when it comes to training. I'm afraid. And when I've been doing my ring muscle up work, it's been really scary to like get up high to the top of a high set of rings. And we just realized recently in our gym that the set of rings that I've been working on is like too far apart to be efficient at. And so I've moved to a set of rings that's more open in the floor. And the first time that I got up there a couple weeks ago, I literally had a meltdown in training, and I was so scared that I couldn't really complete the work that I had to do. And I thought to myself, like, this is the point where it feels absolutely shitty in this moment. But if I just get through whatever rep I can do today, it's going to be productive for the future.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely true. It was like a shit show when I was doing it a couple weeks ago. And then I came in the next week and just like popped up a couple banded muscle ups like it was no big deal. And it's like, I knew that I had to get over that hump to make it productive.
Yeah.
And there's something about failure that feels like the end, but really it's the beginning, because that's like the point that you actually need to move through to get where you want to go.
I love that. That's a great one to end on. Okay. Thank you all for listening today. We will catch you on the next one.
We will. See ya.